At 39 years old, Terrence Howard made $48,752 a year as a senior diesel mechanic. He was a good man, a man whose worth was measured in the steady rumble of a perfectly tuned engine and the blackened grease under his fingernails that never quite washed away. He believed in things you could touch, things you could fix. He believed in the loyalty of a well-made tool and the simple honesty of a hard day's work. What he did not believe in, what he could not comprehend, was the document he held in his trembling hands. It was a standard divorce filing, Form F-14, delivered by a bored-looking process server just an hour before. But it was the attached schedule of assets that had hollowed him out, leaving him a ghost in his own home. The house, a modest 3-bedroom ranch in College Park they had bought 12 years ago for $189,000, Haupt was already eerily silent. Simone was gone. Her closets were empty, the scent of her $220 Chanel No. 5 perfume already fading, replaced by the sterile smell of the cleaning service she must have hired. She had taken everything of value: the living room furniture from Restoration Hardware, a $12,000 suite they were still paying off, the 85-inch Samsung television, a $3,500 extravagance he'd questioned, the art from local galleries she'd collected, with price tags he was never allowed to see. She had left him the bed, a few worn towels, and the kitchen table, and according to the document, she had left him the garage. He scanned the list again, his eyes catching on the 2 lines that felt like a punch to the gut. Asset: detached garage structure. Value: $0. Asset: 1969 Chevrolet Chevelle, non-operational. Value: $0, $0. The garage was his sanctuary, the one place in the world that was entirely his. It housed a lifetime of tools, painstakingly collected since he was a teenager, a Snap-on toolbox that cost him $8,000 10 years ago, an entire wall of wrenches, sockets, and specialty equipment worth at least another $15,000, and the car. The car was not just a non-operational vehicle, it was a promise. A 1969 Chevelle SS 396, a rusted-out shell he'd bought for $4,500 6 years ago, a project he poured every spare hour and dollar into. It was his dream, sitting on 4 jack stands, waiting for the heart he was building for it. To Simone, it was just a pile of junk. To him, it was the future. And she had declared it, under penalty of perjury, to be worthless. She was telling the court and the world that his dream, his passion, his very identity outside of their marriage had no value. He didn't yet know the full scope of her betrayal. He didn't know about the $410,000 she had hidden, or the life she was already living without him. All he knew, standing in the echoing emptiness of his home at 6:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, was that the woman he had loved for 15 years had just declared him, and everything he cared about, utterly worthless. It was a devastation so complete, so quiet, that it made no sound at all. Have you ever been made to feel like your life's passion was just a childish game? Tell us in the comments what you poured your heart into, only to have someone dismiss it. Their life together had been a carefully constructed facade, a play where Terrence was given his lines, but never the full script. He saw their marriage through the lens of domestic normalcy, a series of routines and small acts of service that he believed were the bedrock of love. He was the steady, reliable foundation. Simone, he thought, was the beautiful house built upon it. He would wake at 5 a.m., the house still dark and quiet, and pack his lunch in a beat-up $15 Igloo cooler. 2 sandwiches, an apple, and a thermos of coffee. He'd pull on his $80 Red Wing work boots, stiff and stained with 1,000 different kinds of fluid, and be out the door before the sun rose over Atlanta. His days were spent in the cavernous, noisy bay of a commercial trucking depot, wrestling with the massive diesel engines of 18-wheelers. It was hard, filthy work, but it was honest. That $48,752 salary wasn't glamorous, but it paid the mortgage on their $1,900 a month note. When it kept the lights on, and it funded Simone's life, a life he was beginning to realize he knew very little about. When he'd get home, exhausted and smelling of diesel, the contrast was immediate. The house would be pristine. Simone might be on a call, her voice a smooth, professional murmur. She worked in marketing, a job with an ambiguous title and a salary she described as decent. On the kitchen counter might be a receipt from one of her lunches with friends at Bacchanalia or Aria, places where a single entree cost more than he made in half a day. A $250 bill for 3 people. It was a client meeting, honey, she'd say, a breezy dismissal. His world was tangible. Hers was abstract. When her 2021 Lexus RX 350, a $55,000 vehicle, had a check engine light, he was the one who spent a Saturday with his $300 OBD2 scanner, diagnosing a faulty oxygen sensor and replacing it himself for $78 in parts, saving them the $500 the dealership would have charged. "Thanks, babe," she'd said, barely looking up from her iPad, where she was scrolling through what he now knew was the Neiman Marcus website. The Chevelle in the garage was a constant, low-grade source of tension. It was his one selfish act, his cathedral of steel and rust. Simone saw it as an eyesore and a money pit. "Are you ever going to finish that thing?" she'd ask, peering into the garage, her nose wrinkled at the smell of penetrating oil. "You spend so much time playing with that old junk." Playing. That was the word she always used. It wasn't work, it wasn't a craft, it wasn't a passion, it was a child's game. He'd be meticulously cleaning a set of original valve covers, was a task requiring patience and precision, and she'd call from the doorway, "Don't forget we have that dinner party at the Martins on Saturday. Please try to get the grease off your hands this time." The Martins, who lived in a $1.2 million house in Buckhead and spoke of European vacations and stock portfolios. Terrence always felt like an exhibit at those parties, the salt-of-the-earth husband. One Christmas, she presented him with a $3,200 Chanel handbag. "My mother was cleaning out her closet and wanted me to have it," she'd said, her eyes wide with manufactured innocence. He, in turn, had given her a beautiful, custom-made jewelry box he'd crafted from reclaimed walnut, spending over 40 hours in his garage sanding and finishing it. She smiled, said it was lovely, and he never saw it again after that day. It didn't fit the aesthetic of their bedroom, she'd explained. He remembered a conversation about their finances just 6 months ago. He'd wanted to buy a new engine hoist, a $1,200 piece of equipment that would make pulling the Chevelle's engine possible. "Terrence, we can't afford that," she'd said, her tone laced with disappointment. "My commissions have been down, and we need to be saving. We're on a tight budget." He'd believed her. He'd felt guilty for even asking. He made do with his old, borrowed chainfall, unaware that tight budget was a fiction designed for an audience of one. The facade was perfect, seamless, and built on a foundation of 1,000 quiet lies, each one dollar-tagged and delivered with a condescending smile. The betrayal, once revealed, did not come as a single tidal wave, but as a series of escalating, deliberate shocks, each one designed to strip away another layer of his dignity. The initial filing was just the first tremor. The earthquake was yet to come. His first meeting was with a court-appointed lawyer, a tired-looking man named David Chen, whose office was a cramped, cluttered space above a check-cashing store. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and desperation. "Look, Mr. Howard," David said, sighing as he flipped through the paperwork Simone's high-priced legal team had filed. Your wife has a top-tier firm. They're claiming you're financially irresponsible, that you wasted marital assets on—" He squinted at the page. "A worthless vehicle project. They're offering you the garage and its contents, and in exchange, you walk away from any claim on her future earnings or retirement accounts. Frankly, and given your income disparity, it's not the worst deal I've seen." Terrence felt a surge of indignation. My income disparity? I paid for that house. I paid for her car. That worthless vehicle has parts in it worth more than my daily driver. David just held up a hand. "I hear you. But what you feel and what we can prove are two different things. Her declaration says the joint savings account has $1,846.15 in it. She's declaring her income at $72,000. On paper, she's the higher earner, but not by a life-changing amount. They're painting you as a hobbyist who doesn't contribute." A few days later, Terrence's phone rang. It was Simone. Her voice was cool, distant, like a stranger making a business call. "Terrence, I just wanted to see if you'd had a chance to look at the papers," she said. "I got them, Simone," he replied, his voice flat. Good. It's really the fairest way. Just sign them, and we can both move on. You get to keep your garage, your car, your little hobby. It's what you love, right?" The condescension was a physical thing, a pressure in his chest, a little hobby. She was offering him his own life back as if it were a cheap trinket, a consolation prize. He said nothing. Her voice hardened. "Don't drag this out, Terrence. It will only get more expensive for you." The line went dead. The next blow came a week later, a formal notice from the bank, delivered by certified mail. Simone had filed a motion to freeze their joint account, the one that held the only money he had in the world, his last 2 paychecks. The reason cited was to prevent the dissipation of marital assets, a cruel irony given that the only assets being dissipated were the ones he had earned with his own 2 hands. He had until the end of the week before he would be locked out of his own money. He was sitting at the kitchen table staring at the notice when his friend Marcus called. Marcus was a fellow mechanic, a straight shooter. Man, you're not going to believe this," Marcus said, his voice hesitant. "I was doing a mobile repair job up in Buckhead today, off Peachtree. You know that new glass tower, the Sovereign? The one where condos start at like $750,000? "I know the building," Terrence said, his attention still on the bank notice. "Yeah, well, I saw Simone. She was coming out of the private residence entrance, got into her Lexus, and drove off. Looked like she lived there, man." Terrence's mind couldn't process it. "No, you must be mistaken. That's impossible. We can't afford a place like that. I'm telling you it was her. Same car, same everything. Just thought you should know." The final, most devastating piece of the puzzle clicked into place the following night. He was trying to call her, a desperate, foolish attempt to reason with her about the bank account. He needed money for groceries, for gas. The phone rang once, twice, then picked up with a jarring clatter. He heard her voice, but she wasn't talking to him. She was on speakerphone, her voice sharp and clear, full of a casual cruelty that stopped his heart. No, Gerald, I'm telling you, it's fine," she was saying to her lawyer. "He's not going to fight it. He's too proud and too simple." A man's voice, smooth and expensive, replied, "He's still entitled to discovery, Simone. We need to be prepared if he pushes back on the asset sheet." And then came the line that would echo in his mind for months, the line that ignited a cold, quiet fire in his soul. Simone laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Oh, please. Give him the garage. Let him play. It's full of junk anyway. It will keep him busy while we finalize this. The man thinks a balanced crankshaft is high finance. He won't know what hit him." Terrence slowly lowered the phone. He didn't hang up. He just sat there in the silence, listening to the dead air. She hadn't just left him. She hadn't just lied. She had built a cage for him out of his own passion, and she was laughing about it. He looked through the kitchen window at the dark shape of the garage. Let him play. She had no idea what game they were about to play, and she had no idea that he was about to change the rules. Saturday, October 12th, 2:17 p.m. The air in the College Park garage was thick and still, tasting of rust, old gasoline, and the damp Georgia humidity. Sunlight struggled through a single grimy window, illuminating dancing dust motes in a solitary beam. For Terrence, this place had always been a refuge. Now it felt like a prison cell, albeit one he'd been generously allowed to keep. Simone's words from the phone call, "Let him play," were a corrosive acid in his gut. He was done feeling helpless. He was done being the victim in her story. If she thought this garage was just a playground, he would use it as a workshop for her undoing. His eyes fell on the Chevelle. It sat silent on its jack stands, a hulk of primer gray metal and exposed wires. For months, he'd been planning the next major step, pulling the original, seized-up 396 engine to make way for the restored 454 big block he'd been slowly building. It was a massive, greasy, back-breaking job he'd been putting off. Today, it felt like the only logical thing to do. It was an act of defiance. He was going to take something apart to put himself back together. He cranked up the old stereo, letting the sounds of gritty southern rock fill the space. He rolled the heavy engine hoist, a borrowed cherry picker that groaned in protest, into position over the car's open front end. The rhythmic clank of the hoist's chain was a comforting percussion. He started the process, a ritual he knew by heart. First, drain the fluids. The dark, sludgy oil bled out, followed by the sweet, toxic smell of old antifreeze. Then, disconnect the peripherals. He labeled every wire, every vacuum hose, with masking tape and a Sharpie, a habit of precision she'd always mocked. So meticulous, she'd once said, for a man who works with his hands. He unbolted the drive shaft, the exhaust manifolds, the transmission housing. Each frozen bolt that broke free with a sharp crack was a small victory. His knuckles were already scraped and bleeding, his blue work shirt stained with fresh grease. He didn't care. The physical pain was a welcome distraction from the emotional agony. Hours passed. Finally, it was time for the main event. He attached the heavy chains from the hoist to the lifting points on the engine block. He took a deep breath and began to crank the hydraulic handle of the hoist. With a groan of tortured metal, and the engine began to lift from its mounts, separating from the chassis for the first time in over 50 years. Once it was clear, hanging suspended in the air like a monstrous iron heart, he moved to the final step before mounting it on the engine stand. He had to remove the big, round air cleaner assembly that sat atop the carburetor. It was held on by a single wing nut. He spun it off, lifted the metal lid, and reached in to pull out the old paper air filter. But his fingers brushed against something that didn't belong. It was smooth and cool, plastic. Tucked deep inside the circular housing, pressed flat against the metal base, was a package. It was a standard manila envelope, sealed inside a Ziploc bag, which was then meticulously wrapped in black electrical tape. It was secured to the bottom of the housing with more tape, hidden completely from view by the filter element. This was not something that could have gotten there by accident. This was placed. This was hidden. His heart began to pound a heavy, frantic rhythm against his ribs. His hands, slick with grease, trembled as he fumbled for the utility knife on his workbench. He carefully sliced through the layers of tape and plastic, his mind racing. What could it be? Old registration papers? A forgotten title? He pulled the manila envelope free. It was surprisingly thick. He tore open the flap, his greasy thumbprint smudging the paper inside. He pulled out a sheaf of documents. The top page was crisp, professional, printed on heavy bond paper. At the top, in elegant blue lettering, was a logo he recognized from television commercials: Morgan Stanley. He read the words, but his brain refused to assemble them into a coherent thought. It was a brokerage account statement. The name on the account was Simone Howard. The statement date was just 3 months ago, and then he saw the number at the bottom of the page. The one listed under Total Account Value, $410,213.87. He sank onto a nearby stool, the papers shaking violently in his hand. $410,000. He read the number again and again. It was real. This was the tight budget. This was the commissions are down. A wave of nausea washed over him. But as he flipped through the pages, he saw something that cut through the shock and replaced it with a cold, clear focus. On the final summary page, Samprolda wa mafainori kalvo, there was a separate section, a declaration of assets. And at the bottom of that page was a notary public's stamp, embossed and official, and next to it, Simone's clean, elegant signature. She had, for some unknown reason, had a summary of her own secret wealth notarized. It was a fatal, inexplicable mistake. She had hidden her lies in the one place she was sure he would go, inside the worthless project she so thoroughly despised. And in doing so, she had just handed him the weapon that would bring her entire world crashing down. The cold fury that settled over Terence was as solid and heavy as the engine block hanging from the hoist. The initial shock, the dizzying sense of betrayal, began to cool and harden into something else: resolve. He did not scream. He did not throw a wrench across the garage. He carefully placed the grease-smeared statements back into the manila envelope and sat on the dusty concrete floor, his back against a stack of old tires. He thought about Simone's laugh. Let him play. He knew with absolute certainty 2 things. First, he could not confront her. Any tip-off would allow her to move the money, to hide it better, to create a new set of lies. Second, his overworked, under-resourced public defender, David Chen, was no match for the legal machine Simone had hired. David was a rowboat. Terence needed a battleship. The next morning, Monday, he called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. He took the $300 in cash he had managed to pull from the joint account before the freeze took effect and put it in his pocket. He showered, scrubbing the grease from his hands until they were raw, and put on his only suit, a simple black $250 suit from Men's Warehouse he'd worn to weddings and funerals. He looked up the top family law attorneys in Atlanta, the ones who specialized in high-asset divorce and forensic accounting. He found a name that appeared again and again: Evelyn Reed. Her firm was located in a sleek glass tower on Peachtree Street, a world away from College Park. The consultation fee was $500, but he called anyway, explaining his situation to a paralegal with a calm, desperate urgency. Perhaps it was the mention of notarized documents and asset concealment, but they found a cancellation and squeezed him in that afternoon. He walked into the law offices of Reed and Associates and felt an immediate sense of intimidation. The floors were polished marble. The air smelled of expensive leather and quiet power. He was shown into a corner office with a panoramic view of the city. Ms. Evelyn Reed stood to greet him. Seems she was a tall, elegant black woman in her 50s, with her hair in immaculate locks adorned with a few silver beads. She wore an $8,700 Armani power suit that probably cost more than his entire tool collection. Her handshake was firm, her eyes sharp and analytical. "Mr. Howard," she said, her voice a low, commanding alto. "My paralegal said you have a matter of some urgency." He sat opposite her at a massive, polished mahogany desk. He hesitated for a moment, then reached into the briefcase he'd borrowed from Marcus and pulled out the manila envelope. He laid the contents on her desk. The greasy thumbprints on the pristine Morgan Stanley letterhead stood out in stark, vulgar relief against the opulence of the room. Evelyn Reed picked up the first page, her expression unreadable. She read it, then the next, and the next. She paused at the notarized signature, pulling a pair of reading glasses from her desk to examine it more closely. The silence in the room stretched for what felt like an eternity. Terrence's heart hammered against his ribs. Finally, she looked up at him, and for the first time he saw a flicker of something other than professional detachment in her eyes. It was the look of a predator that has just caught the scent of blood. "Mr. Howard," she said slowly, her voice dropping even lower, "this isn't just a divorce. This is felony-level discovery fraud. This is perjury. This is a gift." She tapped the notarized page with a perfectly manicured finger. "Your wife having this document notarized is an act of either supreme arrogance or supreme foolishness. Either way, it makes this document irrefutable." She swore to its authenticity herself. She leaned forward. "Tell me about the car." He told her everything. About Simone's condescension, her little hobby comments, her worthless junk declaration. He told her about the phone call he overheard. A slow, cold smile spread across Ms. Reed's face. "The irony is poetic," she said. "She has committed fraud and then hidden the evidence inside the very asset she used to justify the fraud. A judge is going to have a field day with this." She laid out the plan. It was simple and brutal. They would do nothing. They would let Simone and her lawyers proceed, fat and happy with their deception. They would allow them to schedule a deposition. They would let Simone sit under oath and perjure herself, digging her own grave one lie at a time. "We will not reveal this evidence until she has committed perjury on the record," Ms. Reed explained. "We will document the chain of custody for these documents meticulously. You found them while working on the car. You will continue to work on the car. Every piece of evidence will be photographed and videotaped as it is recovered from the vehicle." Terrence looked at her, hope warring with fear. "I can't afford you, Miss Reed. Her lawyer is probably billing $1,000 an hour." She waved a dismissive hand. "Don't you worry about my fees. I will take this case on contingency. My firm will be paid from the assets we recover from your wife. And believe me," she said, her eyes glinting, "we will recover them, plus damages. And my fees, which at my rate of $1,200 an hour, she will be ordered to pay in full. Now go home, Mr. Howard, and play in your garage." Terrence Howard became the finest actor of his own life. He inhabited the role of the broken, defeated man so completely that even he sometimes forgot where the performance ended and the reality began. He played his part with the same precision he used to gap a spark plug. The first test came 2 days after his meeting with Miss Reed. Simone called, her voice tight with irritation. "Terrence, I got a notification from my lawyer, Gerald. You've retained counsel, some high-end firm downtown. What are you doing?" He let out a long, weary sigh, a sound he had practiced. "I don't know, Simone. The legal aid guy said I needed someone better. I don't know what I'm doing. They just took the case. I think they feel sorry for me." He let his voice crack just a little. I'm trying to figure things out. I don't have much. You've frozen the account." There was a pause on the other end. He could almost hear her calculating, processing this new information. A high-end lawyer feeling sorry for him fit her narrative. It meant he was pathetic, not a threat. "Well," she finally said, her tone softening back into condescension. "Just don't let them fill your head with nonsense and run up a bill you can't pay. The offer is still the offer. It's the best you're going to get." "Okay, Simone," he whispered. "I hear you." That weekend, he went back to the garage. He set up a tripod with his phone, following Ms. Reed's instructions to the letter. He hit record, stating the date, time, and what he was about to do. "Saturday, October 19th, 11:03 a.m., he said to the camera. Continuing disassembly of the 1969 Chevelle engine. He moved to the engine, which was now mounted on a stand. His next task was to remove the valve covers. They were caked with decades of grime. He pried the first one off with a putty knife. It came away with a sticky, satisfying pop. And there, nestled in the oily sludge of the cylinder head, was another package. Smaller this time, another Ziploc bag, wrapped in tape. He brought it to the workbench, the camera following him. He carefully unwrapped it. Inside was not a financial statement, but a stack of folded papers. He unfolded them. They were emails. Printed emails between Simone and a real estate agent from Harry Norman Realtors. They detailed the purchase of Unit 28B at the Sovereign on Peachtree, the very building Marcus had told him about. The emails confirmed the price, $780,000. And a single line in an email from Simone made his blood run cold. "The transaction will be an all-cash purchase, funded from my brokerage account to avoid any financing paper trails." He held the email up to the camera, his face a mask of cold fury. She hadn't just hidden money. She had converted it into a hard asset, a palace in the sky, while telling him they couldn't afford a $1,200 engine hoist. A few weeks later, the official notice arrived. He was scheduled for a deposition in 2 weeks. He called Ms. Reed immediately. "This is it," she said, her voice calm and steady. "They want to lock in your testimony. They expect you to be a mess. You will not disappoint them. You are a man with nothing, who has lost everything. When they ask you about your assets, you will tell them the honest truth about your empty bank account, your old Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles, your tools. And when they ask you about the Chevelle," she paused for effect, "you will look them in the eye and say, 'It's just an old project, doesn't run. My wife says it's worthless.'" The night before the deposition, he received a text message from Simone. It glowed on his phone screen, a beacon of her hubris. "Heard you have your deposition tomorrow. Just be honest. It'll be over before you know it. We can both move on." He stared at the message, the sheer audacity of it taking his breath away. She was coaching him on how to be an unknowing accomplice to his own fleecing. He typed back a single word, the simplest and most profound lie he had ever told. Okay. Each lie she told, each condescending piece of advice, was another shovel full of dirt on the grave she was digging for herself. And Terrence just kept playing his part, waiting for the moment he could help her fill it in. The deposition took place on a cold, rainy November morning in a sterile conference room on the 40th floor of a glass tower downtown. The rain streaked down the floor-to-ceiling windows, blurring the Atlanta skyline into a gray watercolor. It was a perfect backdrop for the quiet devastation that was about to unfold. Terrence sat at one side of a long, polished table, wearing his same $250 suit. He felt small and out of place. Across from him sat Simone, looking radiant and confident in a crisp, cream-colored $2,400 Burberry dress. Next to her was her lawyer, Gerald Vance, a man with silver hair, a deep tan, and a $15,000 Patek Philippe watch. He radiated an aura of smug, expensive victory. Ms. Evelyn Reed sat beside Terrence, a picture of calm authority. Her files were stacked neatly in front of her. She gave Terrence a subtle, reassuring nod. Gerald began the questioning, his voice smooth and patronizing. He spent an hour establishing Terrence's financial situation, painting a picture of a man with a modest income and no significant assets. Terrence answered every question honestly and meekly, just as Ms. Reed had instructed. Yes, his salary was under $50,000. No, he had no stocks or bonds. Yes, the joint bank account was nearly empty. Then Gerald leaned back, a predator toying with its prey. "Mr. Howard, let's talk about the marital home. You understand that the equity will be split, as is standard?" "Yes, sir," Terrence said. "And you have no other properties? No vacation homes? Why, no rental units?" "No, sir." Then came the turn. Gerald picked up Simone's sworn asset declaration. "Now, your wife, Miss Howard, has been very generous in her proposal. She has offered to let you keep the detached garage and its contents at the College Park property, free and clear. Do you agree that this is a fair resolution?" I guess so," Terrence mumbled. "And what are those contents, Mr. Howard? Some tools? An old car?" "Yes, sir, my tools. And a 1969 Chevelle." Gerald smirked, glancing at Simone. "Ah, yes, the Chevelle. Does this vehicle run, Mr. Howard?" "No, sir, it's a project." "And what would you estimate its value to be?" Terrence took a breath and delivered the line he had rehearsed 100 times. "I don't know. It needs everything. It's just an old project. My wife says it's worthless." Simone shifted in her chair, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on her lips. It was done. He had accepted her narrative. Gerald nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Howard. I think we're done here." "Not quite," Evelyn Reed said, her voice cutting through the room like shattering glass. Everyone turned to look at her. She stood up slowly. "I have a few questions for Ms. Howard." Gerald sighed dramatically. "Evelyn, must we? This is all very straightforward." "I insist," she said. Her eyes locked on Simone. Simone sat up a little straighter, her smile fading. Ms. Reed walked to the head of the table. "Ms. Howard, you signed this financial declaration under penalty of perjury, did you not?" "Yes, of course," Simone said, her voice clipped. "And this document, it lists all of your financial assets as of the date of signing?" "Yes, all of them. So to be clear for the record, you have no other bank accounts, no investment portfolios, no brokerage accounts?" "That is correct," Simone said, her eyes flicking nervously toward Gerald. "And you own no other real estate either in your name or held in a trust?" "No," she said, her voice a little too firm. Ms. Reed paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "Ms. Howard, you just heard your husband testify that he believes the Chevelle in his garage is, in your words, worthless. Do you agree with that assessment?" Simone saw her opening, a chance to land one last dismissive blow. She smirked. "It's a piece of junk. It doesn't even run. He just plays with it. Its contents are worthless." "Thank you, Ms. Howard. You have been very clear, Ms. Reed said. She turned to the court reporter. "Please note the time. 11:42 a.m. The deponent has testified under oath that the contents of the 1969 Chevelle are worthless." She then turned to the door and gave a slight nod. Her paralegal entered, carrying a large, sealed sealed evidence box labeled Howard versus Howard, Exhibit A. He placed it on the table with a heavy thud. Gerald Vance shot to his feet. "Objection! What is this? We have not seen this in discovery." "That's because this is discovery counsel," Ms. Reed said coolly. "These are items recovered from the worthless 1969 Chevelle your client just testified about." She opened the box. Her first pull was a large Ziploc bag, the electrical tape still attached. A greasy thumbprint clearly visible on the manila envelope inside. She placed it on the polished table. Simone's face went completely white. She looked as if she'd seen a ghost. "We would like to enter into evidence Exhibit A-1, Ms. Reed announced, her voice booming in the suddenly silent room. A notarized statement from a Morgan Stanley brokerage account in the name of Simone Howard, showing a balance of $410,213.87. This document was recovered from the air filter housing of the worthless car at 2:17 p.m. on October 12th. Simone made a small choking sound. Gerald was sputtering. This is inadmissible. It's outrageous." Ms. Reed ignored him, reaching back into the box. She pulled out another grease-stained package. Exhibit A2. Sentincha pranent, ikronent, a series of printed emails confirming the all-cash purchase of a $780,000 condominium at the Sovereign, Unit 28B, with funds from the aforementioned brokerage account. These were recovered from inside the left valve cover of the worthless engine. She continued, her voice a steady, relentless hammer. Exhibit A-3, copies of tax returns from the past 3 years, declaring an income nearly double what was stated on her financial affidavit, found taped under the driver's side carpet. Exhibit A-4, receipts for over $50,000 in luxury goods from Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue. Paid for from a secret credit card. Found stuffed inside the original glove box. With each exhibit, another piece of Simone's meticulously constructed world turned to dust. She began to tremble, her eyes wide with panic, darting from the greasy evidence on the table to her lawyer's horrified face, to the cold, unyielding expression on Terrence's. He didn't look angry. He didn't look triumphant. He just looked calm. It was the calm of a mechanic who has found the source of the problem and knows exactly how to fix it. The game was over. She had lost. The collapse of Simone Howard's life was not a slow crumble. It was a demolition. The shockwaves from that conference room radiated outward, dismantling her existence with the same methodical precision Terrence had used on the Chevelle's engine. The first consequence was legal and immediate. The deposition was abruptly terminated. Gerald Vance, his face a mask of fury and humiliation, pulled Simone into the hallway. Terrence could hear their raised, frantic whispers through the thick glass door. When Ms. Reed emerged, she was carrying the evidence box. The judge, informed of the blatant perjury and discovery fraud, voided Simone's initial divorce filing on the spot. He scheduled an emergency hearing and referred the matter to the district attorney's office. Simone wasn't just losing a divorce case. She was now the subject of a criminal investigation for felony fraud and perjury. The second consequence was financial, and it was catastrophic for her. Acting on an emergency motion from Ms. Reed, the court placed an immediate freeze on all of Simone's known and newly discovered assets. The $410,000 Morgan Stanley account was locked. A lien was placed on the $780,000 Buckhead condo, preventing its sale. Every penny she had schemed to protect was now tangled in a legal web. A Wanani and the forensic accountants Ms. Reed hired, at a cost of $400 per hour, began to crawl through every transaction. The third consequence, Petrolikenig, was the final divorce settlement, which came 3 months later. It was a bloodbath. Due to the egregious nature of her fraud, the judge invoked a punitive ruling. Terrence was awarded the marital home in College Park, free and clear, all equity, all his. He was awarded 75% of the hidden brokerage account, a sum totaling $307,660.40. He was also awarded 50% of the value of the Buckhead condo after it was ordered to be sold. Finally, in a moment of pure, karmic justice, Simone was ordered to pay 100% of Terrence's legal fees. The bill from Reed and Associates came to $82,450. Simone, who had tried to leave her husband with nothing, was now legally obligated to make him a wealthy man. The fourth consequence was social. The story, as juicy and shocking as it was, leaked. The tale of the high-flying marketing executive who hid her fortune in her mechanic husband's junk car became the stuff of legend in the Buckhead social circles she so desperately wanted to conquer. Her friends, the ones she'd impressed with her Chanel bags and client lunches at Aria, distanced themselves overnight. She was no longer a sophisticated woman of mystery. She was a common swindler, a punchline at cocktail parties. She was ostracized, her social currency plummeting to zero. During this time, Terrence's phone, which had been silent for weeks, began to light up with calls and texts from her. He never answered. He just listened to the voicemails, each one a station of her descent into desperation. The first voicemail was angry. "Terrence, you snake? How could you? You and that vulture lawyer. You think you're going to get away with this?" The second was pleading. "T, please call me. We can fix this. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I was scared. We can talk to the lawyers. Work something else out." The third was sobbing. "They're going to take everything. My job. They've put me on leave pending an investigation. My life is over. You did this to me, please. I have nothing." The final voicemail, left at 3 a.m. a week before the final hearing, was just the sound of her crying, punctuated by a single whispered word. Why? Terrence saved every message, forwarding them to Ms. Reed as further evidence of her unraveling. He didn't feel triumph, not yet. He felt a profound, quiet sadness for the woman he had once loved. But he also felt the cold, the hard certainty of justice. She had asked why. He looked at his own hands, clean now, but still bearing the faint lines of ingrained grease, the calluses of a lifetime of honest work. That was why, 1 year later. The air didn't smell like old oil and rust anymore. It smelled of fresh paint, new concrete, and the clean, sharp scent of high-grade synthetic motor oil. Terrence stood in the center of a gleaming 4-bay commercial garage. Bright LED lights shone down on polished gray floors. Over the main door, in bold black letters, was a sign, Howard's Precision Auto. This wasn't a hobby. This wasn't a playground. This was his business, his future, built from the ashes of Simone's lies. In the first bay, under the brilliant lights, sat the 1969 Chevelle. It was no longer a hulk of primer and rust. It was a work of art. Its body was painted a deep, lustrous black, so polished it looked like a pool of liquid night. The chrome bumpers and trim, which he had painstakingly replated, gleamed like silver. The project had cost him $45,000 to complete, a sum he could now easily afford. Under the hood, where Simone's secrets had once been hidden, sat the heart of the machine, a perfectly tuned, monstrous 454 big block engine. It wasn't just a car anymore. It was a trophy, a monument to his vindication. He was no longer Terrence Howard, the $48,000 a year diesel mechanic. He was Terrence Howard, owner and lead technician. He had 2 young, eager mechanics working for him, both of whom he was paying a better wage than he had ever made. He had traded his greasy work shirts for clean, embroidered company polos. He was his own boss. After locking up the shop for the day, he didn't drive his old Toyota Camry. He slid behind the wheel of the Chevelle. The interior was all new, the smell of fresh leather filling his senses. He turned the key, and the big engine roared to life with a deep, throaty rumble, the sound of power, of control, of a promise fulfilled. He drove not to the old house in College Park which he had sold, but to a comfortable, new construction home in a quiet, leafy suburb. It wasn't a glass tower in Buckhead. It was a home with a yard and a 2-car garage that was for the first time just for his daily drivers. He thought about Simone. He had heard through the grapevine that she had avoided jail time but had received a hefty fine and a long probation. Meaning she had lost her job and had been forced to sell the condo at a loss to pay her legal bills and his settlement. The last he'd heard, she was living in a small apartment somewhere OTP outside the perimeter. The ultimate fall from grace for a buckhead socialite. He felt a pang of something, not pity, but a kind of distant melancholy. She had never understood him. She saw his $48,752 salary and the grease under his nails and measured his worth accordingly. She never realized that true value isn't a number in a brokerage account. It's a skill in your hands. It's the integrity in your heart. It's the passion that drives you to build something real and lasting, not just a portfolio of paper assets. She tried to hide her paper wealth in his world of steel and oil, and his world, with its unyielding honesty, had simply exposed it for what it was. His phone buzzed. It was a new client, a referral. "Yeah, I heard you're the best," the man on the other end said. "I've got this old Mustang that nobody can seem to figure out." A slow smile spread across Terrence's face. He looked out at the setting sun, its golden light glinting off the Chevelle's long black hood. He felt a sense of peace that was more valuable than any dollar amount. "Bring it on in," he said, his voice calm and confident. "We'll take a look under the hood." It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the things people dismiss as worthless hold the most value. What we build with our own hands and hearts can't be hidden or devalued by those who only understand the price of things, not their worth. Thank you for joining us on Love Beyond Pride, where we believe that true wealth is always a matter of character. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice and new beginnings.